Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Hello. Nice to see you guys again.
Likewise. Good morning.
Always.
I'm gonna be
Tommy, you're in a punchy mood this morning.
Punchy. I feel happy.
Yeah, happy.
I'm gonna be honest. I'm
gonna be punchy again.
I'm not running that much sleep tonight. Last night, so I'm gonna be a bit all over the board. I'm sure today, and I was gonna make a comment here. I was writing it down as we were joining the intro here. I was like, I think Michael talks in third party. Michael talks in third party when he gets a little tired. He hasn't had as much sleep. So I was thinking. Anyways,
I listen. The expectations are high for both of you. I posted on LinkedIn, on Twitter for the episode. I said, Mike and Seth are going to take something super mundane and make it exciting. So,
Tommy's like, show me the money. Make it exciting. Let's go.
Don't let me down. 7.
Entertain. Well, I'm not sure how well we'll do with this. We're gonna start. We'll just kind of roll with it, and we'll see what happens.
Those who saw the post and are expecting something really neat. Sorry,
I was in a. I guess I can talk about this. I was in a phone call with the Microsoft MVP team this yesterday, and they're talking about how do you prepare your contributions to become an MVP, all this stuff. I had someone in the chat window smartly say, hey, is that microphone going for an MVP? Because that thing is so big in front of your face. Maybe it should get nominated for an MVP. I was like, that's funny. That was a good joke. And I thought that was hilarious. It's like, yeah, the microphone is pretty large and in charge. So I'll just acknowledge it and move on.
You took that better than I would. I would have been like, hopefully your face gets nominated. Right?
Anyways, I guess on camera, maybe it's the lens. It's probably the lens. It's really, this cup looks like the size of my head. This microphone looks ginormously large. I think it's just because of the way
proximity.
The angle. Yeah, I'm literally right on top of the camera.
Especially when you leave the coffee mug like right in front of the camera, which sometimes you tend to do.
Right down here. It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Michael must be very small, or the coffee cup must be very large.
Michael hasn't slept in 3 weeks. That's what I hear.
Yeah.
Oh, it's been a little bit crazy.
Good morning to the riveting conversation of the Explicit Measures podcast. We're happy you're joining us in our morning delirium.
Yes, it sounds like it. Let's get through some intro pieces here, and then we'll jump right into our actual topic for the day. So quick, a couple announcements here. I just want to let you know, if you're longtime listener of the Explicit Measures podcast, SQL Bits, you may have heard of, is a conference that's coming up here in the March timeframe, March 14th through 18th. You can learn more information at sequelbits.com. We have a discount code for you. So don't say we never gave you anything here at Power BI Tips. You can get 5% off your ticket registration by using the code Power BI Tips 5 in order to get 5% off your ticket registration. The tickets are not super cheap either. So 5% off would be pretty good. So anyways, that's one of our announcements. Another one coming up is if you can't make it to SQL Bits, which is at the ICC Wales, you could attend the Power BI Virtual Summit. Our buddy Reza Rad over in New Zealand is putting on an amazing conference. He does a great job, super professional, really like the content and the people he's pulling together. March 6th through 10th, called the Global Power BI Summit. You can visit globalpowerbisummit.com and go register there to attend that event. One other announcement here, and I really hope he's on the chat listening here live. We have a special announcement from Greg Baldini, the DAX expert himself. I definitely want to give it. This is a non-paid thing, but none of this stuff is paid, honestly. By the way, we don't do any paid sponsorships. This is just us trying to help out people across the community because we like it so much. There is a new tool out called Argus. I guess it's called Argus BI. Argus, I think, is the name of the program. Greg Baldini has been working on a software suite that helps you track, update, get lineage, monitor all of your things around Power BI. So visit argusbi.com. That's Greg's new project, and it looks amazing. I've been talking to Greg with it a little bit on the side here. They've got some really great goals for the program, and I really think you should take a look at it. So it's going to help you monitor your Power BI environment, listen up, and talk about what's happening, who's downloading what resources. I'll get into it a little bit more, and see if I can get Greg to give me a little demo, and I can speak more intelligently about the actual program. So anyways, we like Greg. You're doing a great job in the program. We wanted to give you a shout out there, Greg. All right. Any other kind of?
I feel like there's a pronunciation thing. I just need to know, Greg. Is it Argus or Argus? Is it
Oh yeah, I'm saying Argus. Yes.
I'm saying I think
Anyway,
Argus.
you think Argus? I think it's Argus. Argus. Like the J.
You're wrong.
Let us know in the chat. So Greg will correct us. He's already on the chat, and I hear him.
Yeah, I don't even know. I got to look up. Is there a meaning behind this word?
So in other news, let's talk about quickly some things that came off the Power BI blog. One that I'm very excited about, and I think speaks a lot to the enterprise grade of things that Microsoft is investing in. So Kai Uncroft, which funnily enough, Kai doesn't have a Twitter handle. I tried to tweet this message yesterday, and he's not on Twitter apparently.
No,
so
he's not.
Kai, get on Twitter, man. I know social media is maybe not your thing, but I tried to give you a little shout out yesterday. But thank you for delivering the announcement of the public preview of Power BI dataset scale out. This looks really interesting, where you can push a Power BI legacy client or whatever, desktop, it sounds like. You can push a legacy desktop, or you can use external tools. You can push to a replica master, and then that replica master will then, repeat or rebuild or build additional data sets, will scale out that data model for multiple users. I think this is a really interesting feature here. What do you guys think about it? You could take a look at the blog article and read up about it a little bit.
I did. Just waiting to see if Tommy wants to pop in here.
I think this is way down your realm. I don't think I have nearly as much to contribute as Mr. Bauer here.
I'm super stoked on this one. Right. So yes, it looks like essentially what this is doing is creating some pretty significant performance improvements in the back end. And from what it looks like, pretty easy to just turn on, and it automatically will take care of this stuff for you on the back end, where you're essentially having a read-only replica that allows you to, get the three main things that they point out, right? One, it's cost efficient data set scalability, right? So it should improve that threshold that you have right now, where as your models get really big, and you may be doing incremental refresh on them, like you can refresh more if you have to do a full refresh, right? Where you're essentially going to stretch out that, 30 gig to maybe more, because you're not you're utilizing like this read-only replica, the read and read write one that will give you the space you need, and then compress it back down before passing it off to the read-only, which is where all your reports are going to be plugged into. So that reliability and performance for refresh also seems amazing, because what it does is apparently refresh in the back end, and then it'll kind of like swap it, right? So your report doesn't have any downtime, whereas like sometimes that can happen where you're like refreshing a report. If it's a full refresh, like sometimes the report isn't operating the way you would expect it to. But that isolation certainly should improve how well your refreshes occur. One of the things that'll be interesting to test out as I get stuck into here is if I'm doing a full refresh on a report and it fails, right? Like it kills the data set, or it should just retain the front end. The report should never be down, right? So that's where this benefit comes in, because typically you would ensure that before you would swap, all your data is there, it's all set to go. And if they're managing all of this for you on the back end, like that's crazy. That's super cool. So I'm super excited about this one. I'm not going to say it's janky, but like you have to know what you're doing, right? There's an enablement and a tenant that I think they said is by default enabled, but in order to turn it on, you've got to write an XMLA script and execute it against a particular workspace. But it sounds like as things go more towards GA, it'll just be like, turn it on for my whole capacity. So obviously we're talking premium, right? Licensing, like this is a premium core thing, but like the
it's got to use the XML
endpoint, right? Yeah,
man, what I love is they just keep enhancing. Like these are big improvements, like from a enterprise data structure side. that like they're just
You need to have.
keeping in premium. So like for those of us on premium, it's fantastic because it's like, man, that's a massive improvement to my existing ecosystem. Like this lets me stay on the current capacity I'm at for quite a while. Like it that enhancement. But
Yeah.
I know at the same time what it should be doing is pushing those folks that don't have premium into an arena where it's just like, man, this whole thing makes sense because we now have all these enterprise features as well. So it's pretty slick. And the only I'm not going to say downside, but if you dive into the actual documentation, the fun stuff with documentation, if you didn't know this, is always way at the end. So it's under it's under considerations and limitations.
Yes, exactly.
The only one that caught my eye that would be interesting was or challenging to me would be the last point when the Power BI data set scale is turned on, changes to either model rules for RLS or OLS aren't supported, right? So you probably have to I don't know what that means.
Something?
You have to redeploy the entire model, or it just means like once you set that model up, you're gonna have problems. So like not little, but like there are a few caveats of like testing it out and
it says that
what sort of performance gains we get. But man,
the final option in that list, or the little note there, when Power BI data set scale out is turned on, you can't change those things. However, to make changes to the features, you need to disable the scale out feature. Wait a few minutes.
Oh, okay.
And then
oh well, that's easy.
Wait
then,
for
right?
Yeah.
It's just like but that's one of those like why did my entire report stop working? Like why did my data set and all my reports right? Where's my RLS? It's like, well, that's the caveat where you probably got to like turn it off first, do the changes, turn it back on.
And that's going to be one of the priorities too. They're going to fix like because it's public preview.
Oh sure,
yeah.
Okay.
Either way, guys, like this, like for them to automatically be doing this in the background, like this is a lot of time. Otherwise, where you're doing, availability groups, read-only replicas, etc., and SQL and my experience back there, like there's a lot involved in, especially in that communication between all that stuff. So this is well done, Kai. This is a huge improvement. I look forward to playing with this one and seeing what it does.
Okay, I'm going to say one thing here, and then I love the feature. I think it's good. I've already jumped into my Microsoft admin portion of the tenant. I've looked at it, and I'm like, oh, interesting. You can turn it on, or you can turn it off. Mm-hmm. There is no, it's like all on or all off. So it's an tenant-wide setting. You can't set it on.
You're saying
you can't set it by resource group. Yeah. So I don't get the control ability at the user level to say, okay, these users can turn these workspaces on or off. I would have expected it's not an entire organization level thing because they're able to turn it on and off by workspace. This feels similar to what happened with data marts when they rolled those out. It's initially that the feature came out with hey, it's on for everyone or it's off for everyone. So I don't really love that feature. See
how it gets deployed to GA will be interesting. I think they mentioned in the article, but like what the key points were right now, you actually like the tenant, it is a tenant-wide setting, but you can only enable this by workspace through the XML query.
And that would make sense though, because your data set needs to be on a large data set mode to do it.
And that's the other point, right?
Yeah.
You have to have your workspaces and data sets in like large data set format for this to work. And you also need obviously XMLA read write because you wouldn't be able to enable the script.
But I think this is going to solve a lot of people's challenges or issues within the Power BI ecosystem, especially for that larger scale.
Excited to try them out.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. I'll be curious so we'll have to have a podcast specifically around this feature just to kind of get a feel for how's the feature working. What are some edge cases here as we start playing around with those?
Yeah, and I have a good one too, right? Because especially in the that scaling out per data set during like high peak times of usage.
Yes,
I'll be really interested to see where like I get an 80 or 100% capacity, message every once in a while where I'm really getting, the snot beat out of my capacity, whether or not this like starts to alleviate a lot of that by devoting more resources towards, the data sets that are getting hammered the most.
Excellent. Wonderful. Anything else? There's
I
one more.
believe, yes,
We have
I
one more
have a
update from
quick
Tommy.
update. So
All right,
I
Tommy.
did say I was going to follow up with one of our previous episodes was on should you use the search feature in Power BI? And
Okay. All right. What does Tommy think about
So-
the new search? Okay. And I think in this conversation, just to give a little context here for the people who didn't listen to the episode, we were kind of heatedly debating whether or not you should use the search item inside the fields pane. Is this where you're going with this, Tommy? The fields pane?
Yes, the fields
Should
pane.
you use the search field in the fields pane to go find records of things? And Seth and I were kind of in the camp of you should use it. It makes it easier to just find a couple columns that you're looking for. And survey says,
Man,
your world
I'm
has
a
changed, hasn't it?
believer. Yeah. So I was doing a demo off a new data set yesterday, and I was like, just thinking to myself, holy crap.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I am a believer now in terms of the speed. You're right. From an efficiency, it's those little seconds.
It's a couple.
This little frustration.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I would say
It's really for measures.
correct. It's like measures and things like, and you've written them. They're in there somewhere.
Mhm.
And it's, if you're on a 3 or 4 or 5 table thing, probably not a big deal. If you
Right.
don't have a lot of columns in a table, probably not a big deal. But as soon as you start getting like 4 or 5 or 6 tables, and when you open them up, the list becomes scrollable. It just gets a little bit harder to find things. And again, another pattern. Again, I hope you use this as well. Like if you name your measures with a common pattern, sum of, average of, whatever,
all around. Yeah.
you can just type the word sum, and then all the measures just appear across all tables that are there. So I'm like, there's a little bit. Again, we may be polishing. This may be a polishing activity where we're we're trying to like maximize every second out of every day we do things with. But like this potentially could save you just a little bit of time here and there about looking for and finding
from
stuff.
column names to even you searching the table. The search is very intelligent, and so
Agreed.
I am definitely on the other side. Now, it's only for objects. For the formatting pane, no.
I'm telling you, the format
is a completely different experience.
Okay, so this is what I was talking about. The format pane helps you find those features, but I literally lose context to where the feature's coming from because it doesn't take me to like where the feature is. It basically hides everything else. And to Seth's point, it searches the visuals settings and the general settings, and then I get all screwed up.
I know.
Like there's not enough context for me.
Which is interesting. Why the behavior of those two things, even though they're right next to each other, is different, right? Because you do retain the table in the field search well, which
I don't like the searching in the formatting pane.
Things in the properties pane, right? Like retain where it's coming from. So I have that placeholder like, oh yeah, now I know, I recall, I'm remembering, or you're showing me where this property is when I have 10 of them show up once in a while.
I will say for models that I'm very, very familiar with that I'm using, I'm still tending, like I'm habitually still just going to the column or table that I know measures in.
Yes.
But for new things, I like I said, I don't have to search a lot or be as precise.
Yes.
And like display folders, the whole thing. It's been so
it's good.
This year, both football and now search and Power BI enlightened too.
Yeah,
I never watched.
We're changing you, Tommy. We're changing you.
I am a full-blooded American.
So.
Tommy, weren't you born in America? Like, haven't you been in America the whole time?
I know, but I have a buddy. I talk more Italian politics. I talk more Italian politics shop than I did Americans at one point. So I'm watching football. I'm enjoying Budweiser. It's crazy. I'm
looking forward to the day when we can when we do the podcast from Italy, and Tommy is just. We're gonna do it with a tablecloth that I don't know if this is even an Italian thing, but the tablecloth that's red and white checkers, and Tommy's sitting there with a massive bowl of pasta, and we are just having Tommy, cigarettes, wine, and pasta. Like we're just sitting there hanging out and enjoying some culture there.
I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm gonna be obnoxious.
More so than the normal?
Yeah, right. It amps up from here.
You lobbed that one to me, and that was an easy.
All of a sudden, I'll have an accent like in my town. Oh, come over. Oh, my mother. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. All right, on to real topics now. We've burned literally all the time talking about things. So thank you very much for humoring us. We're going to get into our real topic today. The real topic for today is, should we hide objects inside Power BI. And I'm going to take some liberty here and kind of go, well, there's objects. I think what you're asking about this one, Tommy, in the question here is you're thinking about like objects in like the filter pane. But I'm also, as I do with many things here,
you can always ask before the podcast.
I don't like it. I want to surprise you. Surprise! I'm changing the topic on live air here. Or, could this be also, Tommy, hiding visuals or using bookmarks to hide things? Like, okay,
objects. Seeing how the title said hide objects always?
I don't know. A visual is an object.
Why don't we start
Seth,
with Tommy
I'll let you
describing-
All right. Seth, you take it from here and recover this.
Tommy's going to describe what objects and where are we talking about so we can narrow down the focus of conversation.
I'm not going to use periodization here, even though the agenda clearly says like display folders and perspectives, which are all
I
objects.
know.
So
Okay.
this actually does come from a previous episode. We were talking about display folders or measure tables, and also in the search where there's a lot of clutter in our model. And I think the real topic here, question is it a best practice, and should we always be hiding columns, objects, even measures at different points or tables in our model in the canvas view?
Yes.
What are the limitations here? Is that important? And Greg actually commented, I believe last night, where do we really need it if we're hiding it? What does it affect, and why is it a beneficial aspect?
You should definitely hide all the pie charts. The chat agrees with me here. Any pie chart should be immediately hitting on all reports. So you can build them, but you must immediately hide it and then move on to building a normal
I think
report.
we're speaking specifically to like columns, the model.
Just
So
teasing.
again.
So I'm gonna lean on some of the technique I like to use. Again, I think we're not technically beginner developers inside Power BI, so I think we're probably using external tools a bit more than other people. So I'm gonna kind of preface my comment with that. If I'm using Tabular Editor 3, I'm writing scripts and I'm automating as much as I can to help me automate the movement of pieces in the model. Some things that I'm doing now that I think are very relevant, or some patterns that I'm following that I think make sense, is I like making folders for my measures. I like putting my measures in the fact tables they come out of. So if you're building measures or a star schema, most of your measures should be living in the fact tables. And then if you write some scripting, you can automatically add columns and the name of the measure with the script. And so what I'm doing now is I'm making a folder, grabbing all the numerical columns, using some syntax sugars, some of the name of the column, and then I'm moving both the column that it came from, hiding that column, making it not visible to the end user, and moving the measure into a folder called calculations. So I'm trying to kind of simplify the model a little bit. So I would say anytime you're building a measure on a column and you want to explicitly call out the calculation for that measure, I would recommend you hide that column and do not expose it, and actually force people to use the measures within the model. So I would hide those columns that the measures are relying on, unless they're absolutely needed, like a dimension type thing. So that's one thing that I would do.
Seth, what are your opinions as I propose the questions?
I'm more aligned with that. I can't say that I'm putting it into practice a lot, right? Because a lot of the models that the team has spent a lot of time on the last couple of years have all been for embedded reporting. So nobody's seen them except us, right? So it does add a bit of scale, but at the same time, it's not a data set other people are using. And I think that to me is the most distinct thing. If I'm going to start hiding things, it's going to be because a wider audience outside of the BI group is going to be interacting with it, and I want to shape that a little bit better, shape their experience better, so that to Mike's point, you're using my explicit measures instead of generically implicitly using the columns that are there, etc. But I could make it a use case for both, kind of thing. I just don't have an opinion of being able to always do something all the time, because I think I think those data sets are for when you're sharing out to an internal audience.
Would you so what are the other impacts then? Because what I can think of is when you hide something from the model, it's not only in a sense invisible to when you're using the canvas unless you say view hidden. It's also hidden in personalized visuals. It's hidden in Analyze in Excel. It's
Yep.
hidden for there's no way
Okay.
to unhide it when you're connecting to that data model
Correct.
in another report. So
Yep.
there is an impact. It's not just a polish point of view.
Yes.
It actually has an impact on other dependent models. So that being said, I would always do it from a polishing point of view where it's like, well, I don't need those columns. Like, let's say you had a lot of a dim date table and there's a lot of like,
extra columns in there.
Extra columns. Maybe not need all the time even.
You loaded the entire SQL BI data.
Oh boy.
Date table and
I can't even open up the DAX statement.
That query.
Yeah.
I like the statement that they wrote. I'm a little bit annoyed by it because every time you click on anything in that table, for some reason the DAX editor decides says, I'm going to give you the whole table all the time. You
computer
lose
starts
the entire
slightly.
You lose the entire report page because the DAX statement is so long.
But those points, there are dependencies and there are effects or things that can affect other people or other models that are important to consider. I'm
gonna jump in before you move on to the next thought, because
Sure.
I think you're already thinking the next step here. One thing I would like to use hiding and showing of items. I don't know if you could automatically do this, but one of my main challenges with Power BI Desktop is as you build things, I bring in engineered data from the Power Query. Once I bring that information into the report, I don't necessarily know how all of the visuals and filter panes tie back to the model when I'm done. So there's always this like cleanup effort, and there's some tools that have been made out in the community that help you clean up your data model of removing objects that are not used, right? So if I have a measure that references 2 columns, I need to keep those 2 columns to support the measure. But if you look at the end of your report build, potentially there's some things you may want to remove from the model just because they're not being used. So I would like a feature, or it would be nice if I could do some automation inside Desktop where I could hide everything. And then as I bring it over to the report canvas, it becomes unhidden. And so by the time I'm done building, I have just a handful of things that have been unhidden wherever those measures or things have been used, in a conditional formatting thing, in a filter pane, in the visual, because then I could see truly what was left after that whole aspect. And again, I'm not saying this is a feature that needs to be developed right away, but in my mind, there's some kind of workaround here that I feel like I want a better way to understand what of my model have I consumed inside to make the report go, and then hide everything else.
What have I put in my reports? I'm trying to follow there. Like, I think I'm there.
It'll hit you at 35 minutes.
So what we're suggesting though is every column that may be a reference to a calculation and is not needed on its own,
correct,
should be hidden.
I think so.
But there inherently then should always be a dependency prior to a column being hidden. Otherwise, why is it in your model?
That's also my point there too. Like, so I don't have a good way of, like, there's nothing, I can't run something in Desktop that says, show me all the stuff that's used, and then I can have like, a red-green list of things in the filter, the fields pane that shows me, oh, these 10 things were never used in your model. I mean, this may be something that Microsoft works on, where they say, hey, Microsoft build, at the end, it should be analyze my model. And it does an analysis of the report page, everything in there, and then talks to your data field and say, hey, did you want me to analyze this? By the way, here's 5 fields we think you're not using. We may recommend you either hide them or remove them. Like, it's that kind of feature that I'm thinking about. But again, I don't need it there. It would be nice to have.
But I think those are still 2 separate discussions on what's unnecessary and honestly, like, what's clutter from an organization when I'm in the canvas view, because there may be dependencies that I'm doing in Power Query, or there may be dependencies I'm doing in DAX, but I'm never needing to display or visualize that particular column. And I think, to me, those are 2 big those are very significant differences. I don't know if that's always the case, but I'm assuming you guys too could think of multiple scenarios where that's the case, where you need to reference a column in a DAX measure. And I know some of those tools do that, where they'll actually look at the DAX to see if there's any other dependencies on a column, but I may never need to visualize it.
I'm going to give you another kind of example here of where I think you should be always hiding something. So this is another, I think you should always do best practice. I guess I would maybe call this
You're always
one.
telling people what to do.
I know. Just listen to me and you'd be fine, right? Just use the search pane already.
Or the opposite, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
you're better off. Anyway, tell me, Mike, what should I do?
So
this guy had a podcast
inside the fact tables to the dimension table. So again, I'm talking star schema here. There's definitely exceptions to this where you might have a bidirectional filter. Again, I don't recommend them. You may have a one-to-one relationship that happens. So again, I'm going to talk very specifically to a use case. This is where I have the dimension table and the fact table, and I have a relation that goes from one to many. On the one side, you may need that dimension inside the report. So as you look at that relationship, sometimes it's like ID, right? An ID typically is not really used in reporting very often. You're usually probably using the name of something in a dimension table, so you might be able to hide that. However, I would say if that ID is a text string that links to a fact table that has a text string, I would definitely recommend hiding, because it's literally the same data twice. Because if you put the two columns together in the same table, ideally those numbers you should just have a match one-to-one of all those relationships, because that's how it works inside Power BI. On the many side, you should most often hide the many side of the relationship. That column does not need to be inside the report. And the reason being is if that dimension table is filtering multiple fact tables, so I have a single date dimension that's spanning multiple fact tables, I don't ever want you picking the date column of the fact table. I don't want to display that information. Rather, I would want you to pick the date or description field from the dimension table, because that way multiple measures are being filtered prior to, it's doing the filtering before it executes the calculations in each of the fact tables. I know this gets very technical. It sounded easier in my head, and it all of a sudden got like way into the weeds here. But like, it's a very nuanced thing, but I think it's very user friendly when you do that, and it's also part of the best business practice analyzer recommendations to hide those, but you just don't need them. So I'll throw that one in there in the mix as well. I think that's an area where you will always hide the many side of the relationship inside your data tables. And there may be some cases where you want to hide both sides of the relationship. It just doesn't make sense to keep those ID columns around.
That makes sense to me.
Did we mention hierarchies too? Because
someone in the chat was mentioning that.
Yeah. So yeah, and that's I
agree with that one as well. The elements of the hierarchy should be hidden, and you should only let the entire hierarchy show as the unhidden column. I like that as well. I'm trying to find the chat. Who said that in the chat?
Yeah, because I can hide the columns and then still keep everything displayed in the hierarchy. So yeah, I mean, I think Greg pointed out a point, like if you're hiding it, you don't need it, you should delete it. I would disagree with that more often than not, because I think there's so much optimization you can do, but I think there's a lot of use cases where sometimes you do need to show or display. One thing that we have not talked about enough that I'm still frustrated is not a global available feature is perspectives in Power BI. It's available.
You can't build them. It obeys them, but you can't build them yet.
No, and the other part is the only really use case for it is personalized visuals. Is
that the only use case for them?
I believe you can't use it if you're doing the connect to a model. It's personalized visuals.
Well, okay. I was just on a call recently, and it's so funny how you bring these things up, Tommy, like right when I'm talking about this stuff. So I had another client kind of talk to me about exactly that thing. Like, hey, we have perspectives, and I think perspectives is a analysis services feature that was kind of brought over to Power BI. It's the idea a user can show up and they're able to observe the model with a certain perspective.
Right.
To be very clear here, perspectives are not security. So if you're trying to hide tables or elements from people, the row level security is not, the object, right. Dang it, what the heck is it called again? Just escaped my mind. What feature are we talking about right now?
Perspectives?
I was reading the chat and I just told, perspectives, sorry. Gosh, I need to get some more sleep. This is going to be rough today. But that is a concept where you have, if I have too many tables and I'm focusing on the perspective of like sales. So this is where you could have two entire star schemas inside a model, and it's serving both needs, or there's maybe a couple shared dimensions, and I'm trying to show people a lens of the world in a group of tables or not. So I think that makes sense. But I think this is also a carryover feature from analysis services. And as a company was migrating from AAS to Power BI, they were using perspectives, and they found that if you use the XML endpoint, if you use the access data set from the regular Power BI connector in Power Query, you don't have the ability of changing the perspective. However, if you use the analysis services connector, you do have the ability of bringing in the report with the perspective pre-applied.
Oh,
So
really?
You can bring in the thin report with a pre-applied perspective.
But not if you're connecting from Power BI data set.
Correct. So to me, there's something weird in the connectors between the two that are not quite the same, bits and bytes at this point. So sure. What I would say though is, I think Microsoft is continue closing the gaps on things like that. And so I feel like since Azure Analysis Services is the same thing under the hood, it's the superset of Power BI data sets are the superset of analysis services. They'll probably get there. It's just probably not the most important fruit on the tree at this point. They're probably trying to pick the low hanging fruit now of like, scale out, right? That's probably a more important feature right now than just working with perspectives. It's probably a less used feature because that's why it's not there yet.
But it makes sense because you could hide certain objects for certain people.
Yes, correct.
So I think that goes to like, if you were to really ask, like, why should you hide objects? To me, and agree or disagree, there's the two major reasons to hide objects are: one, for your own development as you build a report, but two, for a self-service side of it, or a thin report, where you have all the back end. But really, for a thin report, the only thing that needs to be visualized or shown is what can be used in the canvas, or what can be used from creating a measure.
Yeah, I mean, the only way this makes sense to me is like to invest that kind of time and or confusion even within my own team is if I have to. Like if I'm simplifying somebody else's life, then it makes a lot of sense. If it's like I'm going to hide this stuff because of some theory that it's better for my team that they don't use a column when I created this measure, like, right? Like you're creating more confusion, I think, than solving in those cases. The thing I did want to make a point about perspectives and the investment in time, but though, because if I would wonder, or I think about what is the percentage of data models in Power BI or data sets that are actually in the realm of needing a perspective, right? Because perspectives gives like a smaller subset of a view of a really large model to help end users figure it out better. And I would probably guess that the vast majority of models out there are not that complex, right? People are building a lot of very small, report specific models that it is what it is, as opposed to investing in supporting something like perspectives, where I think you had to a lot of the due diligence and building of something to get it into analysis services, which was much more deliberate than it is nowadays, right? Because you can do it so fast and quick, and Power BI helps you do it. And it's not this antiquated interface that's really difficult to work with, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think that makes sense to me.
I have had success with perspectives and personalized visuals though, because you really minimize
that's what I was going to go after.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really solid use case of like, hey, look, I only want you to use one of three measures for this line chart or this bar chart. Like, I think that's a really good feature. The downside of that is it would be just nice to do it in desktop. So like, so that's where I'm a little bit lost here, because this is a feature. It's like, there's a lot of features. You can do things and like, you can't create calculation groups in desktop yet. Like it's just not possible. So like, this is another one of these things that I think more people would naturally use perspectives if I could say, okay, on the visual, right click, make perspective, and then it gives me the model, and I just pick the columns I need and say, bar chart one perspective, and then I can immediately attach that to that. So it gives me the right. So in one degree, like the personalized visuals is really powerful here because I can build a report that I think is needed and then let the user shape the report a bit more. So we're not doing a bunch of you don't want a bar chart, you want a table? Fine, just change it yourself.
Here's
like
your
I don't
10 objects you can choose from, not 100.
whatever, turn it into a pie chart. I don't care. Like it's not adding any value to me. I'm not going to control that, but I'll give you a good starting point with what I think is best practice for visuals. You take it further and do whatever you want. But I do think that adding that additional perspectives piece really does help limiting those objects. I think it's almost necessary. Let me ask this question. In personalized visuals, anyone who's out there on the chat or whatever, is there a search window for a field in personalized visual? So if you're using a personalized visual and you're trying to find a column or measure, is there a search window in it? I don't know.
I believe there is, but I don't think that helps the user because they don't know the model.
They're just going to be searching for random things. Like they could pick yeah, you're right. They could pick something that just doesn't even make sense. So yeah, I'm with you on that one, Tommy. I think I would definitely like to see more perspectives for that feature alone.
Right. I would say from a global point of view, outside of perspectives, if we're going to say, should you hide something in a global model? I would still say if you're building a gold data set, you should plan for self-service. And I should plan from a developer connecting to this report. And maybe I'm asking a question here. I'm not sure yet. But if you're building a gold data set and a developer is going to connect to that, but also a self-service business user.
Yes.
And I think there's a difference here. So I'll stop there. I don't know what the question or comment is, but I'll let you.
This is where my head was going, honestly, Tommy. Like, so you say a golden data set, and I'm going to use a different term here that's kind of more in line with like the Microsoft. It's the adoption roadmap is a kind of a bit more in line there, right? Enterprise BI or that governed BI data set, right? So hiding things and how the model is being consumed, right? If we think about the pyramid, again, I'm going to really pick on Matthew Roach here again with his pyramid diagram. Excellent diagram, love it, right? If you think about the number of data sets you have at the upper end of your organization, the very highly governed, very controlled, those are the ones you're spending a lot of time making sure that they're very easy to consume. Odds are the higher up that platform you go, you're probably trying to give more exposure to people to not just the report, but the report and potentially the data sets so people can build their own information off of the story of the truth. So I really like that. And I think perspectives and these kind of things make sense at that upper enterprise data set level. However, as the further down we go that pyramid, the more personalized it becomes. And I think there's a lot more leniency to not use these type of features because this is the challenge we've always had when we talk in the podcast. Do I spend a ton of time stylizing and polishing just to get something out the door that people may never look at? That doesn't make sense either. So like there's this other hand of this where like, if I don't really know if I'm building something of immense value, I'm not going to spend a bunch of time customizing it and making it beautiful. I'm just going to get something out the door to get people to react to it. Because a lot of times as you're going through this development cycle, the report is built, people look at it and they're like, I need another feature. Okay, another feature added. Okay, build another report or add more to it. And so you're over the next 2 weeks, you have all these additional requirements that you never had before. And it's frustrating because you're like, this is driving me up the wall. So I think there's some other things there that make a lot of sense as well. So I don't know if I helped or hurt that comment, Tommy.
Yeah, honestly though, I would say that's the kind of the consideration you always have to do because you can't create the two views. And I think that's the biggest problem is I can't say here's one enterprise governed model. And for these users, they're going to get this view. But for these users who are self-service, they're going to get the much limited simplified version. And I think for me, that's a huge hindrance here where I really want to hide as much as possible, to be honest, like, because I want to think about the self-service point of view. But then if like, I've had the issue where I created a government model, I'm connecting to it. I'm like, I need to get that one column, son of a gun. I hit it.
Yep.
So, and there's no, in a sense, way to re-show it. In a sense, it's like it doesn't exist from the visual view. So that I would say, then I guess if you didn't answer this already, but where would you lean then in terms of, are you building or hiding for the self-service, the user, or are you hiding for you more often, or like, where should you lean towards?
It's to me, it's an audience question.
Yes.
Right? Like if the audience is me, I'm not going to just hide stuff to hide stuff.
Yeah.
You can disagree all you want, but
I know.
like,
I know.
I don't see the point. I know how I'm operating across the fields. I know what they're used for. I know what I want to do, like in the model, and like, yeah, to me, it's just overhead I don't need to create for myself or the team that is working with it. Versus the intent of it is this is a data set that you want people using, and
Agreed.
especially because we don't have perspectives, like you would need to make it as simple as possible to digest. And there could be tons of clutter.
Towards
tons of clutter
BI.
and right. And to your point, Mike, right, like key things like making sure that like I would agree, like hide the ID column in the fact table, because that's going to get somebody in trouble.
Yeah,
it doesn't work. I'm using this ID and it doesn't.
So you're
filter
already
anything.
trying to teach them like facts and dimensions, right? Like here, use this when you want to slice and dice. But if they see an ID in both tables, they're just going to pick one. And then things are going to blow up on them, and they're not going to make. It's not going to make sense for them, right? So that's where I would view it.
Evan Arnold also points out here as well that there is also option around hiding some things. I just want to bring up another point. He says composite models are also another area where you'd want to use perspectives, because composite models could be entirely two separate models that you're bringing a bunch of data together, or I'm picking out tables from different models and pulling them together. You may need to pare that down as well. So there may be too much information. So I think that's a great example there. But I would also argue, if you're in the realm of composite models, you're probably already beyond like the self-service BI pieces of things at this point, and you're really trying to work on, really shaping together a clean and well-designed model.
You may need to read that one more time, because it's a better option than perspectives. You don't use perspectives with composite models. In a composite model, I can choose the objects I want to bring in.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
I said yes. That's what I meant to say. Correct. Right. The other way around.
Yeah.
Think about a composite model before you think about a perspective.
Right. But that's a developer point of view, though, because self-service, good luck trying to find what's relevant. When we say the self-service, you really have to think about someone, like having a easy user interface, like you're building an app for them with the data that's only relevant to them. They don't need to necessarily know the entire model. They really just need to know what's relevant for them. Category, subcategory, sales.
Love it. So I think there's some really good points here, and I would again, I want to just stress this idea of what you said, Seth. I think as my final thought here, as we kind of like wrap here a little bit, but I think my final thought of this one is thinking about how we take these models. The further up that pyramid you go, the more you go towards a governed data set, the more rigor you're going to have around a service level agreement. You're going to clean a bit more. You're going to hide some more things. And I think also the further up that pyramid you go towards that governed space, yes, there'll be less data sets to manage, but you're really trying to get the maximum amount of usage. If you're spending all this time to make the data model, we really need to consider how can we get as many people as possible to use it. That's maximizing your effort, whether it's you're building a great report or you're even just exposing the model altogether to, certain people in the spokes of your business that are going to be able to connect to it and build their own stuff. Again, the more you can simplify that model, I think you're right, Seth. It makes it a whole lot easier for other people to consume, and that's really what it's all about. Any other final thoughts for you guys?
You took my thought and added your final thought, so I think it's a combined effort there.
All right, so Seth and I have done
teamwork.
Our final thoughts.
Yeah, we did teamwork.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Oh, I was gonna say that. You took it right out of my mouth.
That's right.
Tommy, anything else you want to kind of like wrap on, or things you want to add around here?
No, I'm just gonna keep with you guys, so we're all on the same page, ending in a nice little way. Yeah. We all agree, and I'm not sure on what.
Look at this. This is all right. Mark it down. Episode 182 or 181. The time that all three of us agreed on the same thing here. Be efficient, not lazy, like Mark says. I agree with you, Mark. Be a lazy engineer or be an efficient engineer, however you want to call it. Build it once, make it work every time, and then move on. So
and use Tableau Editor 3.
And use Tableau Editor 3. It's worth the price of a mission to get that tool. 100%.
They could triple it. I would be like, yeah, fine, kind of thing.
And Tommy's
got Uber too, so to get
Tommy's got oodles of scripts that make you go faster too. So go check out the Power BI Tips GitHub for that one, because you can get 60 plus odd scripts to help you build better data models faster. So love it. With that, I'll just say thank you everyone for participating. The chat has been very lively. Thank you all, chat, for participating. We thank you so much for just kind of adding your comments. There were some great ideas also in here of things you should hide or not hide. So chat, thank you very much. We appreciate you. With that, our only ask, if you like this episode, if you enjoyed what we were talking about, If the first 20 minutes of us rambling interested you, and then you actually enjoyed the topic later on, we'd love for you to share it. If nothing else, you can also share the video at the timestamp when we actually talked about real content. So more than welcome to share that as well. We appreciate that, and it helps us if you give a thumbs up and a like to this this conversation and/or a comment, because it tells YouTube you liked it, and it helps other people find the content as well. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
So real quick, our user group is Thursday, not today. So next Thursday, the 26th. I just need to say that in case you saw the other announcement. You can find the podcasts anywhere they are available, on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, anywhere you like a podcast, you can find us. Join the conversation live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and on powerbi.tips.
We're getting, remember the day when we had to do these outros and we were just so bad at it? It's gotten so much better nowadays. Man, for those of you who are listening from episode 1, man, we've really somewhat refined the technique here, so it's not half as bad as it was. So thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week.